Boredom. We've all experienced it one time or another, the feeling of seemingly not having anything to do, and in response, lazing around hoping that we find something that helps us cope with it. Now while there's a lot of things we can do to get rid of this boredom, this is not a life betterment channel and I personally am not Dr. Phil. However, this is a channel where I engage in and talk about the things I'm into, regardless of how dumb, complex, or funny, like anime and manga, maybe Twitter or CBR one day, regretfully, and in this case, video games. So while I won't make a whole list of ways to cure that boredom of yours, I will say a real effective way of getting rid of it is getting your hands on a good old video game. That's because there is, in truth, a game for everyone, even people that claim to hate games. People like that will just end up like Squidward in the episode where he didn't want to admit Krabby Patties were actually good. I could go on and on about the types and categories of games, but I for one believe that the best type of game for curing boredom is one that immerses you deep into its story, world, lore, etc., with or without online multiplayer. As opposed to fighters, first-person shooters, and all other types of games, games like this typically have high replay value and will absolutely have you coming back for more. Not to mention, if the lore is deep enough to leave you with unanswered questions and theories, you'll probably find yourself wondering internet forums or something to search for the answer to these questions, or having others give their takes on your theories, keeping you entertained even when you aren't actually playing the game. There's plenty of games like this, but in today's video I want to speak on one specific title, one of my personal favorite games of all time and one I think arguably does the best in the open world story-oriented category. Today I want to appreciate the masterpiece that is NieR Automata. So to try to keep it simple, even though the game and its story are anything but, NieR Automata, as you may or may not have heard, is basically this great humanist tale set in a world where humans no longer inhabit the earth due to many complications of the past. Between the threats of outbreaks of disease in prequel games to the current threat of invading machine lifeforms, the human race is placed in a pinch and decides to transfer what small percentage of the population and resources there were to the moon. Before doing so, however, they created androids to fight against the threat of machines so they could one day return to their home. This war between machines and androids would be waged for years, decades, and even centuries, long enough for pretty much all infrastructure the world had built up to be reduced to almost complete rubble. What were once skyscrapers became completely cascaded from top to bottom in sand or flooded with water, forestation occurring all over the world, and things like that. If you've ever seen Dr. Stone, then just imagine that, but over a far longer period of time and on a far greater scale. This leaves countless questions on behalf of the androids of what humans were like, their customs, how they're able to advance the way they did, all of which is the foundation of the humanist theme I spoke of earlier. This all goes hand in hand with the countless instances of existential crises the androids themselves have, always wondering if they were created for any other reason besides fighting, considering that they were born with logic, reasoning, the ability to feel emotion, and make decisions based off these aspects of humane consciousness. Though it may seem like a lot to take in, it's still just a recurring theme, so it isn't overbearing, especially when focusing on the actual plot of the story. All in all, it isn't something you absolutely have to focus on, but still, doing so adds to a whole nother layer of the game's meaning and overall experience. Aside from this theme, there are tons of instances of symbolism throughout the game, plenty of which you probably wouldn't understand without a Google search. Frankly, through research and scripting for this video alone, I found out tons of things I wouldn't have begun to guess about this title. So if nothing else, I have to give huge props to the amount of deeper meaning that went into this game. The symbolism of NieR is without a doubt one of my biggest reasons for loving this game the way I do. But anyways, the story mainly follows the characters 2B and 9S, who work alongside an association of androids going by the name of Yorha, whose only job is to take care of machine threats and survey the current state of the Earth. On this journey, they encounter an abundance of unique characters with great fleshing and stories. There isn't a single character that feels like they lack substance or are misplaced in the story, or even have no reason for being there. They all have something that makes them feel important, even if it's simply how they connect with the theme I keep mentioning, which works because of how deep it is and how much it's brought up. There's even side quests with characters that hold huge weight for things that happen later in the story, but I digress. Each of these characters, as well as the situations they're introduced in, push the progression of the story and cast incredibly well. Though the main subject of the game is this war and how it'll end, these characters give something else to be focused on for the entirety of the game. The amount of build-up and expansion centered around the perspective of these characters you play as, and even side characters alone, is enough to create a story out of a story. That might sound a little confusing, but hear me out. The best way I can explain this is by comparing it to real life. Real life, this world, has no main protagonist. It's composed of people that live their lives individually. Some people know what they want to make of their life, others may not. But in short, we're all different. The true goal of the androids is to wipe out the machines in defense of their human creators and end this war once and for all. But like I said before, they're not just mindless puppets. They were created with logic, reasoning, and emotion. They have an objective and they have no intention of slowing down until they complete it, but the ability to utilize logic, reasoning, and emotion brings them to understand just how much value there is in living and how much they can make out of their lives. They grow curious about the world, and through development, not just story-wise but character-wise, they gain their own goals and reasons for living aside from fighting on behalf of the humans. In fact, even machines, who are in contrast actually known for following a mindless kind of behavior, followed suit. Eventually, tons of characters have this mindset and only continue to grow. Some show more contempt towards these feelings and are always focused on defending their creators and earnestly completing missions first. But there are also characters in a nice middle ground that slowly but surely grow out of this feeling due to the temptation of personal desire or others around them that push a more carefree ideology onto them. Overall, this results in a very diverse cast, where it isn't all that accurate to say that any one cast member is more important than another. Though the main characters we play as are 2B, 9S, and eventually A2, that fact doesn't take away from the importance of other characters, albeit you'll probably feel more attachment to these three than anyone else because they are the main characters, but you'll still have sympathy for other cast members. The way NieR handles its cast is nothing short of top tier in this sense. In a lot of media, not just video games but also in TV shows, movies, anime, etc., it's not unusual for a writer to have trouble writing their cast in an effective way, much less in a way that gives every single character a high level of importance. There's also series that get really close to accomplishing this by creating a main cast introduced with around the same level of priority as the main character, but ultimately they end up losing their importance with the growth of more central characters, let alone the main character themselves. That's not the case with NieR, and it's part of what makes it a masterpiece, not only in my eyes but in the eyes of countless players and fans. You really can't appreciate a cast like this one enough until you've experienced it firsthand. If you haven't guessed it by now, this video is not your typical review. In fact, I don't consider it a review at all. Rather, as I said before, I really just want to appreciate NieR as a story. As a game, it definitely has its areas where it shines, like gameplay or graphics, which are really easy to get into for anyone who's ever played an open world RPG. All the same, going back to what me of a few minutes ago said, any game can have great gameplay and graphics, but I believe that the best games have a great story to go right along with those things. As with many stories, the atmosphere given off through world building and OST is a very important aspect to bring up. Tons of stories are made for tons of different reasons, but if I were to say that part of NieR's purpose as a story wasn't to make you feel some type of way, you might as well never believe me again. When it comes to a story, one of the basic and fundamental things to include alongside a theme and characters is a setting. This means, very similarly to characters and themes, a well-built and properly executed setting can score you major points when it comes to your story. The setting ties into the objective of why the characters are there and can sometimes act as a catalyst for furthering the plot of the story. It also plays a major factor into drawing emotion and interest out of the reader, watcher, or in this case, player of the series, which allows you to better experience the story. When the very ground that our character stands on ties into a deeper plot and lore, it's easy to become more invested in what we're consuming. And as far as becoming more invested goes, all the same is the case for the music that plays in the background for the whole ordeal, also known as the soundtrack or OST. Now I'm gonna be 110% real with you guys. There is quite literally no words at all that I can use to describe how absolutely incredible this game's soundtrack is. And when I say literally, I mean literally. The vocal tracks in the game don't even actually use a real language. In fact, it's just a combination of a bunch of different beautiful words from a bunch of different beautiful languages known for the beauty of how they roll off the tongue, put over some of the best instrumentation that you'll hear. It all comes together to form one of, if not the best soundtrack I've ever heard in a video game, and to be honest, in any type of media in general. Personally, I'm a huge music guy, and I appreciate that I was made to have such a diverse taste in music. In any one moment I could go from listening to rap and R&B to rock, then country, jazz, anime openings, island, music, K-pop, J-pop, whatever, and the list goes on. And while I've yet to hear a soundtrack on such a masterful level of diversity, I can still highly appreciate it when soundtracks like Bleach, Genshin Impact, any Shinichiro Watanabe work, or in this case NieR Automata, get so close to this level. Hand in hand, the soundtrack and world building create one of the best atmospheres ever and adds the experience that much more. So to sum things up, just play NieR, especially if you're bored. It was released in 2017, so you could get it for a pretty reasonable price almost anywhere except from PlayStation Store obviously. But it is on sale on the PS Store at the time of the making of this video, so yeah, there's that. Like I said, I know I didn't talk about gameplay all that much, but trust me, whether you're big on open world RPGs or not, it shouldn't be all that hard to pick up. Just know the gameplay is immaculate. If you do decide to take a look at it for the story, you'll definitely have a blast, I can guarantee that. Also sort of failed to mention, the game has 26 endings, but most of them are joke endings, and the only ones you need to gain the full experience are the first 4 endings, endings A, B, C, and D. You can stop at any one of the first 4 and feel content, but getting through all of them really expands upon the story's outcome way more. Ending E is also a really good one, and if you decide to get all 26, your boredom will definitely be quenched for a while. You don't need to play prequel games, though they do give you a better idea of what's happening in the world. It isn't necessary. Speaking of which, one of the prequels, NieR Replicant, just got a remake in April, so really look forward to playing that one when I get the chance. But other than that, if you enjoyed the vid, go ahead and toss a like and comment if you want. Also consider subscribing as well. But as always, this has been Tenta. Stay easy, guys.